Hey everybody, it's Josh with the Lead Ministry Podcast. Now, hey, listen, before we jump into the podcast, I want to let you know of some exciting news. I have a brand new course that I'm getting ready to release entitled Lead Conflict. That's right, Lead Conflict. Listen, if you have been in ministry for any length of time, you understand that conflict is a part of our role. We want to teach you how to minimize the frequency and likelihood of conflict taking place, but we also want to help you strategize how to manage the conflict that does come your way. Now, again, as you would expect, this is a full-length course. Tons of downloads, tons of fantastic strategies. Again, the new Lead Conflict course is coming your way, and we're excited to do this little podcast series that kind of teases out some of the concepts that we're going to be releasing through this brand new course, Lead Conflict. All right, gang, let's jump into the podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lead Ministry Podcast. We want to give you tools, strategies, and helpful things in your front and in your back pocket for leading well in a church or ministry or nonprofit context. Well, here's the deal. Part of this is knowing how we can manage conflict. We're in this kind of extended series about conflict management because it's just literally that important. Well, I'm grateful that my good friend Bill Van Kirk is here. Thanks, Bill, for being here, buddy.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think the problem with talking about conflict so much is whenever I preach on something or the Lord is trying to teach me something, he gives me plenty of opportunity. So,
mercy. Yes. And this one we're talking about today, as I was preparing this one, I was like, wow, this is really going to be important in my home life. This is going to be important in my marriage. This is going to be important with my children. This is going to be important in any ministry context. This is Life 101. This is pretty much biology. Well, we're grateful that you're here. We are talking about conflict and how to manage conflict. A couple of the things that we seek to do. Number one, we want to define and help redefine what conflict is. We want to develop a principle about how to manage conflict, and then we want to actually put into practice how can you do it. So we've got these three big categories that we're going to be putting content into. So let's define it. What is the definition of conflict? Well, again, we're kind of beating a dead horse, but we really think with each episode that we want to make sure that we're really making sure that you understand that conflict is a serious disagreement or argument, typically protracted. As you said, Bill, what did you say a couple of episodes ago? This is not a little skirmish. What is it?
A little squabble.
A squabble.
It's not a squabble.
This is not a squabble. A squabble is a slight difference of opinion that quickly resolves itself. Well, conflict is a serious disagreement or argument, typically protracted. It takes some time. Well, fact of any fool can create conflict. In other words, it is easy to be a creator of conflict. That happens really naturally for me. That happens naturally for all of us, but it takes an emotional genius to broker peace. Well, we have two pathways that we're seeking to hammer home, and it's this. We want to intelligently reduce the likelihood of conflict by good processes, by good management skills, by having systems in place. You can literally intelligently reduce the frequency of conflict, but that doesn't mean that you're going to eliminate conflict. So then we need to learn how to intelligently manage conflict that's going to come our way. So today, we're going to dive in. We're going to go a little bit deeper and develop this concept. We understand what conflict is. If you've been in ministry, you've had it. But now I'm going to give you a principle today. We're going to develop this principle, which I call slow, soft, and small. Slow, soft, and small. It starts out like this. You cannot choose how people treat you, but you can choose how you react to them, or better put, how you respond to them. So, somebody approaches you in the hallway of the church. They are clearly inflamed and enraged and upset about something. And they got their hackles up and they're kind of coming into you, right? Their physical body is actually impending on you. They actually have their body language is large. They're speaking loud and they're kind of having fast, erratic actions. Okay, we got a choice at this point. What we can do is we can either respond in kind, or we can choose slow versus fast. I think this is really important. So I'm going to move through these quickly. We'll come back to each one. The contrast is slow versus fast. The contrast is soft versus loud. The contrast again is small versus large. So from a biological standpoint, Bill, we can actually inflame a situation and make it worse than it is when we begin to go fast and we begin to speak rapidly. Our eyes get larger. Do you see what I'm talking about here?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is almost like like you said in the beginning, it's almost like a biological or psychological like study of how people act when they are really upset or angry.
That's right.
And you're saying that what that looks like is fast in the way that you talk, in the way maybe you approach somebody, in your movements could even be fast.
That's right.
When you're upset about something. So the opposite of that for us would be slow.
To go slow. And to maybe, again, this goes with this, but be slow to speak.
Yes.
Be circumspect. Be thoughtful. Maybe have some intentional pause. Maybe even biologically and physically look at the ground, take a deep breath, shake your head softly, giving an indication that you're slowing down the speed of this conflict in this situation. And I got to be honest with you, like if of all of the things that we've talked about in the conflict piece, I stink at every one of these. These three, slow, right? Soft and small. Yeah. I don't do any of these well at all.
Yeah.
Like when I feel like I'm backed against a wall, man, I am a fast talker. I got to be honest. I can raise my voice. I can, even right now, I'm raising my like my posture is getting bigger. And what else do I do? I get large. My eyes got bigger.
Yeah.
These are things that I don't do well. But I want to at least for the listeners, but also, as you said, often when we're dealing with these things, God is dealing with us.
Mm-hmm.
That
Amen.
I think that I would be well served in my marriage. I would be well served as a parent, and I'd be well served as a ministry leader if I could reduce the social anxiety that I'm bringing. And part of that is going a little slower.
Right. That's so interesting to think about how much like we present ourselves with our physical bodies makes a difference in how our conversation will go.
They say that 80% of your communication is nonverbal.
Right.
That is astounding.
Right. And I think the other piece is, if somebody comes up to me and they're talking to me very erratically and quickly and angrily, my natural tendency, my go-to is going to be to match their intensity.
For sure.
Because that's what we do as human beings.
It's called mirroring. It's called mirroring.
Right. Absolutely. And so how can you kind of change the tone right away? Slow down your words. Be thoughtful about what you're going to say. But also, by the way, when we say something, when we don't think and speak, things come out that we don't want to say. At least that happens to me.
At least this happens to you. This is the hallmark of my ever-loving life.
Yes.
If I could go back in time, the problems that I've experienced in my life is because of my mouth and speaking fast and not just at a rapid rate, but not giving kind of like healthy oxygen to the conversation. So this idea of slow versus fast, like slow your roll. Allow breathing, like be conscious of your human breathing. Add in some silence.
Mm-hmm.
Another one, soft versus loud. And so be as conscious as please don't hear that I do this right. But I would be well served if I lowered my volume. Because when we're in a conflict, it's who's going to win? Well, the biology says the loudest, the fastest, and the largest. Those are all intimidation factors. I just want to go back in time. Let's look at a dog, okay? Mm-hmm. Let's look at a dog. And all of a sudden, like my dad is a veterinarian, and my dad used to say, you got to look for the signs. Like a dog will do multiple things prior to biting you or biting a child. And one of the things that a dog is going to do is it's going to raise the hair on its back. And that is an indication that it's getting larger. It is seeking to be bigger than it really is.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it's doing that, or say, for instance, a lizard who has this huge thing that it spreads to the side of its head to make it all of a sudden way bigger, or a puffer fish. A puffer fish is swimming along. It's about this big. It's in danger. Waboof. It's now this big. It's seeking biologically to appear stronger, more intimidating, and that it's got more fight in it than it really does. And it's doing that by getting large. People don't ever think that I get it, that we're soul, body, and spirit, but we're also body, B-O-D-Y. And we innately do this, that we'll kind of make ourselves larger. It's a biological thing. But if we can be conscious of that, we can de-escalate this situation just by our body language.
Right. Well, yeah. And honestly, I mean, I've seen this sometimes where when I get passionate about something,
oh boy,
I will often raise my voice because, my kids call it the pastor voice because, as when you're teaching, people have a teacher voice, you're projecting your voice.
Oh yeah.
And so I've had to be really careful about, hey, what's more effective? Can I get my point across and my passion across in a good way without doing that? Without talking over someone or being the loudest person in the room?
I think that this is the definition of maturity as a leader and the definition of a highly emotionally intelligent person. Mm-hmm. And I'm outing myself. This is a major area of challenge for me. So I think how we approach conflict physically, how we're physically approaching this, our body language truly matters to the outcomes. I'll say this, my approach physically can increase or decrease somebody else's biological fight or flight response. If I'm loud, that's causing them to possibly have a fight or flight response. And by the way, do I want more fight from this person? No. I want this. I actually want it to de-escalate. I don't want more fight. So my approach can either increase their fight. If I'm super erratic and fast, they're gonna be intimidated. And I'll tell you, I don't think what does it say in James 1? Man's anger does not bring about the righteousness of God. What do I want? Well, we want God's righteousness to manifest. And often we think that my anger is going to bring about God's righteousness. And God is like, actually, your anger is antithesis. It's not going to bring about the righteousness of God. So my speed, my loudness, and my largeness, it is actually not de-escalating the conflict whatsoever. I'm causing somebody to get more defensive. That's dangerous.
Yeah. This is fascinating. I mean, I keep thinking about, as we've been talking about this, like how they have been training and retraining police officers to de-escalate situations. And security people, it's like if you approach somebody who is very angry and erratic and is going to do something to harm someone, to match their intensity is not always a great idea unless you've gotten to that point, right? You
Yep.
want to de-escalate the situation. And the way you do that is just what you're talking about. It's talking slower. It's being calm. It is, sharing with them, an inner peace essentially through your actions and your words. And the hope is that they would, instead of you matching them, that they would begin to match you, and they would kind of come down off the ledge.
That's it. And this is so hard. I mean, this is literally like, I think everybody in podcast land, you're just kind of observing God work on Josh during this podcast. Because it's not about winning. It's about meeting in the middle and having resolution.
Mm-hmm.
It's about meeting in the middle and having resolution. So let's do this. We kind of defined what conflict is. Ultimately, we know, as you kind of taught us several podcast episodes ago, that God's desire is unity. So our job is to bring us from a place of conflict to a place of unity. And so this is a strategy that can do that. So let's talk about practicing appropriate responses. Well, if we're talking slow versus fast, to practice pause, to practice like taking breaths. Me taking a breath and pausing reoxygenates the situation. So pause and breath and wait. I don't have to have a super speedy response. It's very hard.
Yeah, that's so true. I would add something into this too.
Please.
I think in those moments, in moments of conflict, when there is a pause or the other person is talking, we're often formulating how we're going to demolish this person's argument, right? And I think this slow versus fast piece is where you pause, you take a breath, and maybe you even pray in those moments. I've had moments like this where I've said, I'm clearly emotionally upset with what's happening right now. If I respond as a human being to a human being right now, it's not going to be good. Right. It's going to be something that comes out of my sinful nature. And so I've said in those moments, in between, I've just said, Lord, I need your help for this. Holy Spirit, help me to respond right now the way you would have me respond,
right,
rather than the way that I want to respond.
Yes.
And I found that pause, when it's your turn to speak, if you pause and you pray that first and you take a breath, God meets you in those moments.
That's exactly right. I believe that, Bill. I'm being ministered to through what you're saying. I'm being ministered to by the Holy Spirit right now. And I truly do think that my slowness to respond is a means by which the whole thing can just take it down several notches. This is not natural to me. By the way, we all come from a family of origin. My family of origin, how did we go about doing this? The loudest and the fastest and the most intelligently logical response, that won. And so I come at it very, very, very naturally to come to an argument, go as fast as you can, be loud, and exert dominance. That is not healthy for conflict resolution. So slow versus fast. We pause, we breathe, we pray, and actually waiting can, by the way, I'm not looking to beat this person, but in a sense, I want them to be confounded by the lack of aggression that I'm bringing.
Right.
Now, another one, we talked about slow versus loud. So having a call. Oh, by the way, I want to say, Bill, I thought of something a second ago when you were talking. Truly, what we're talking about is like adopting the fruits of the Spirit.
Oh.
Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. I probably missed one. I don't know. But my point is that the fruits of the Spirit, if the Spirit is at work in you, those are going to naturally come from you.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard somebody say one time, this is kind of funny. We have an apple tree, 2 apple trees in our backyard, and I don't stand outside and hear my apple trees grunt as they're seeking to push out apples. It just kind of happens naturally.
It does.
And so if I'm walking with the Spirit, this calm, this idea of restraint, this idea of subtle, the subtleties of my communication, being soft as opposed to being loud, again, calm, using volume, restraint, like physically turning down the volume and being subtle, that's going to really insert health into that situation. The fruits of the Spirit, which is an indicator. I mean, like, what kind of a tree are you? And I'm confronted by this today. I'm confronted. What kind of a tree am I? Am I bearing the fruits of the Spirit? Well, sometimes. How about this small versus large? Now, this one here is quite important, and I have a story to share with this. So some other adjectives for the small part would be slight, lower, and personally subdued. Now, back in the day when I was a high school chemistry teacher, some kid would totally blow something up in the middle of class. And there were a couple of times where I had to remove this kid from the room and we were going to have a conversation out in the hall. Now, that kid was thinking that I was going to annihilate and eviscerate them and take them out and just say, you listen here. But I got some training as a teacher. And often, Bill, what I would do is I would go out into the hallway and I would look down at the ground and I wouldn't say anything. And then I would kind of look up at them and then look down at the ground. So I was actually more vulnerable to them. If we were going to have a fisticuffs, if we were going to actually go blow to blow, which, by the way, that's the danger that we're all aware of. In social situations, we're probably not going to come to blows, but that's the danger that we all know exists. Am I right?
Right. Absolutely.
That's where it's out of control at this point. So then I go out into the hall with this kid and I'm looking down at the ground, which means that I'm vulnerable. He could cold cock me and crack my jaw, and I'm not prepared for that. And that gives him, in a sense, a psychological advantage. Now, sometimes also, I would actually take a knee in the conversation and take a position of submissiveness to this kid, even though I was the teacher. The whole idea is to lower myself in order to bring this thing all the way down. And I would speak very calmly and very softly. Boy, it was so much easier for me to do this as a high school chemistry teacher than it is as a husband or a dad.
That's so true, isn't it?
There's a buddy of mine, and I was out to dinner with him last night, as a matter of fact. And this is a weird and random story, but he works for, and this is a true statement here, Bill. He works for one of the richest people in the United States of America. I'm not going to disclose who it is, but they're like one of the probably top 50 in the United States of America in terms of wealth. This is an extremely, extremely wealthy person. And he said that whenever he is talking, because he does like housework for them and he kind of manages everything. They don't want to do anything. They don't have to do anything. And he goes, I actually run my own house and I run their house, right? It is kind of funny. And he said, we just talked about this last night, not knowing I was going to have this podcast today. And he said, whenever I'm talking with the wife, he said, I'll just he goes, she's a lot shorter than me. And he's probably 6'2" or 6'3". And he looks like The Rock. He's actually a very muscular dude. He's just naturally built. Don't we all wish that we had his genetics? However, he can be an intimidating fella. So he said, she's a shorter person. So he said, whenever we're talking about something, I always take a knee because I want her to feel as if she's the dominant one in this relationship. Isn't that interesting?
Wow. That is interesting.
And so this idea, yeah, go ahead.
Well, just like how much posture matters.
Yes.
Yeah. I could learn from this one, I think, because I'm a big dude. And I can see sometimes how my size in certain situation doesn't help me when I'm trying to de-escalate something.
Right. Because all of a sudden we're sizing each other up. And I don't care how spiritual you think you are. The facts of the matter are we are all biological beings. And that is a factor with how we're dealing with this. Even if you're in a church and even if you're dressed up in church clothes, there is this subtle sensation that this person could attack me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, we're
right.
that palpable sense exists. And so the more that we can reduce that, I think the better we're going to be. So I got to tell you, Bill, this is an interesting one. I think that we can adjust what we do physically in order to bring a sense of de-escalation to a conflict. So kind of a tough one for me personally, but I'm learning, I think, brother.
Oh, I learned a ton. Yeah, absolutely. So, now to put it into practice, right?
It is. That's the truth. So slow, small, and what is it? Slow, small, and soft.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to end on a nice and soft note today, everybody. And we want you in the podcast world, we want you to adopt these things. I'm going to try to adopt them myself. We're all in process, aren't we? And I just want to give you the encouragement that if you're in a conflict, check your body language. Check to see that, as Bill said, maybe you could reset the mirroring, that they begin to adopt your peaceable practices right there in the middle of the conflict. All right, gang, we're here for you. We're fighting for you. We are on your side, and we want you to have tools in your toolbox to manage conflict. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Hey, everybody. Thank you guys so very much for tuning in to today's podcast. I hope that it was valuable to you. Before you close this out, I want to remind you that we have a brand new course entitled Lead Conflict. That's right. As you know, conflict is a good case of the inevitabilities, and we want to help you to successfully navigate and manage conflict in your ministry role. So be on the lookout for this brand new course that is going to be dropping soon, Lead Conflict. And thank you once again for tuning into the podcast.